Chairman, we're now live.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'll bring this meeting to order. Thank you. A warm welcome to those attending the Major Applications Planning Committee meeting this evening, and to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. My name is Councillor Steve Tuckwell, and I am the Chairman of this evening's meeting. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are available online underneath the live broadcast. For those in the room and intending to speak, please note that you will be filmed, and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. For those solely observing in the public gallery today, you may wish to know that the camera is angled away from the public gallery where you are sitting. A reminder to anyone speaking today that your voice will only be audible online if the microphone is switched on. In terms of a fire alarm, we are not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarm does go off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For mobile, tablet and devices, I would ask that those in the room please switch any devices onto silent before the meeting starts, but please note that councillors and officers on the committee may use their laptops or tablets during the meeting to view the agenda paperwork. We also have at the back of the room, and this is specifically for members of the public that are here this evening, we have some yellow feedback forms. We'll be grateful if you could complete those in and leave them in the room after the meeting is concluded. There is also a link underneath the YouTube broadcast for those watching online. Okay, before we move into the agenda, I'd like to introduce the voting councillors, otherwise known as the members of this committee. We have Councillor Higgins, who's my Vice Chairman. We have Councillor Cawthorne. We have Councillor Davis. We have Councillor Dotts, we have Councillor Gaelic and Councillor Gill. I'd also like to place on record a welcome to new councillors to this committee. Look forward to working with you in the months ahead. Also, as Chairman, I also may intend to vote in the unlikely event that there is a tie, and I may exercise my second or casting vote this evening. We also have officers who will be supporting the meeting this evening, and I'll introduce those in turn. So we have our Strategic and Major Applications Planning Manager, Mandip Malhotra. We have our Deputy Director of Planning and Regeneration, James Roger. We have our Principal Planning Officer this evening, Chris Brady. We have our Transport Planning and Development Team Manager, Alan Tilley. We have our Legal Advisor this evening, Nicole Cameron. And we have our Democratic Service Officer, Liz Penny. Okay, I'm also going to, as we do have some new members this evening, I'm just going to run through some of the meeting protocols and cover off declarations of interest. So for meeting protocols, I would just advise that only one person at a time may speak, and I, as Chairman, will invite people to speak. As Chairman, I will also invite officers to present on each application, and members need to indicate their intention to speak to myself as Chairman, and I will then invite people to speak in the order in which I observe it. As Chairman, I will invite members to ask any questions of petitioners, applicants and ward councillors who may be speaking this evening. Questions to officers must always be through the Chairman, and any decisions of this committee must be moved, seconded and voted on by the committee. In relation to declarations of interest, for councillors, when we get into the agenda item on the declarations of interest, please indicate which item you have an interest in, state whether your interest is pecuniary or non-pecuniary, and please give a reason why you may have an interest. Members need not to declare an interest on any item of the agenda where they have already listed it on the register of interests. Furthermore, you do not need to declare an interest just because you are, for example, the ward councillor for any application that we're dealing with. Okay, I think that covers off all of the Chairman's announcements. We can now get into the main body of the agenda this evening. So we'll start with agenda item 1, Liz. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chairman, we've received apologies from Councillor Bennett with Councillor Cawthorne substituting.
Okay, thank you, and I'd like to place on record my thanks to Councillor Cawthorne for substituting this evening. Thank you. Okay, agenda item 2, declarations of interest in matters arising before this meeting. Have we got any? No declarations of interest, thank you. Agenda item 3 is to receive and agree the minutes of the last meeting, which was the 26th of April. I think there's only a couple of us that were actually at that meeting. So can I take those minutes as agreed? Okay, if we can note that, Liz, thank you. Agenda item 4 is to advise of any matters notified in advance or urgent, which we don't have any. And agenda item 5 is to confirm there's 2 parts of these meetings. We have what we call part 1, which is in public, and we have part 2, which is in private. We have no part 2 items this evening, and agenda item 6, I can tell you, which is on the agenda, has been withdrawn. That leaves us with agenda items 7 and 8 this evening. We'll take them in that order, and I can advise committee now that agenda item 7 is a petition item, and we will be having speakers on that item. Okay, I think that leaves us now. We can get into what we're all here for this evening, which is agenda item 7, which is the Rainbow Industrial Estate, Trout Lane, Useley. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 7 proposes the temporary retention of the sui generis use on the Rainbow Industrial site for up to 12 months. The site, which is approximately 1.25 hectares, is located adjacent to the Useley Town Centre, the Grand Union Canal, which is to the southwest of the site, and the residential properties in Trout Road and St Stephen's Road, which bound the site to the north and south respectively. The site forms part of site allocation SA39 within the Local Plan Part 2, which earmarks the site for a residential-led mixed-use development. As such, the proposal seeks a set of meanwhile uses which the London Plan encourages local authorities to agree, providing they do not result in significant harm upon the residential amenities of neighbouring residents. I'll just direct you to some of the plans. You'll see the constraints plan here. So you've got the Grand Union Canal to the south, southwest, Trout Road, which is where the entrance to the site is to the north. St Stephen's Road is just to the southeast. This is just another site location plan. This is the proposed site plan, which shows the uses as they are at the moment. I know that's not particularly clear. I'll go through some of the uses in a second. And this is just a picture from the noise impact assessment, which shows the internal haul road, which is what the vehicles for the aggregate storage are using to enter and exit the site. The proposal comprises of a mix of open and closed storage operations, some of which include aggregate storage and distribution, marble storage and distribution, car storage and sales, and street lighting storage. The site has a complex planning history which includes historical use as an industrial site which was destroyed in a fire at the site in 2013. Permission was granted in 2014 for a residential-led mixed-use scheme. However, this planning permission has since expired in 2017. The site was used temporarily for an off-airport car park. The council served an enforcement notice against the unauthorised use of the site for off-airport car parking. However, the temporary use of the site for off-airport car parking was permitted by the planning inspectorate. It should be noted that the planning permission granted by the planning inspectorate had only 4 very brief conditions. More recently, an application was received to use the application site for a temporary period of up to 3 years for multiple meanwhile uses, like those which are proposed under the current application. This slide on screen shows the reasons for refusal for that planning application, which related to noise, dust, air quality, and finally the lack of mitigation. Following this refusal, the site is currently subject to an enforcement notice which was served by the council for the unlawful use of the site and which the owner has appealed against. This appeal is currently ongoing. The current application seeks to address the previous reasons for refusal, and as stated within the officer report, we feel that this has been undertaken to a satisfactory point. It should, however, be noted that between the refused planning permission and the current application, the site has undergone some change in order to address the LPA's concerns. For example, the aggregates area has been moved from the canal side to within the centre of the site. The position of the haul road has been moved away from Caxton House. The blue porter cabins which were on site have been removed, and enclosures of the uses to create a tarmac haul road. Conditions are to be imposed to minimise the disruption to residents, and members will note that these conditions have been further strengthened from within the addendum. The application is recommended for approval, subject to a Section 106 agreement and appropriately worded conditions as amended in the addendum. Okay. I'm just going to go through some of the site photos. So this is a bird's eye view of the what I believe to be was the former use as a off-airport car park. these were the porter cabins which were associated to that use. Those were subsequently removed. What you'll see here is part of the aggregate storage. So you'll note that the aggregate storage area is segregated from the boundary of the site by these large concrete blocks. So in a way that is being contained. This is employee parking, which is located to the front of Trout Road, and you'll note that there's Caxton House on the right hand side. Part of the former Hall Road was actually removed in order to prevent the HGV lorries being able to take a trip out towards Caxton House to exit the site easily, so they actually can't get down that part of the site anymore. This is the rear of Caxton House. You'll note some containers around the edges. This is from the centre of the site looking south-west towards the canal, with St Stephen's Road to the left. You'll note some of the aggregate storage and vehicles to the left. This is just a closer up image of some of the HGVs that we observed on site. And that's it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, no, thank you for taking us through that, Chris. I'm sure members have taken on board what you presented to us there, but we've got a bit of a way to go yet, because this is our only petition item of the evening. So, who have we got as our petitioner? Is it Simon Hazelden? If you'd like to come forward, Simon. I'll explain once you're settled. I'll just explain how the speaking rights works now. So, welcome and thank you for addressing the committee this evening. You'll see in front of me this traffic light system. Once you start speaking, it will be green, and it will be green for 4 minutes. Between 4 and 5 minutes, it will turn to amber, and when it turns red, your 5 minutes is up, and I will very politely bring you to a close at that point. So, when you're ready, press the button on the middle of your microphone, and then we'll start the clock. Thank you.
Okay, I'm speaking on behalf of the petition in objection to the planning application due to the levels of dust and noise that we have already and would experience were the application accepted. The application submitted a supporting document, an air quality survey produced by Hawkins Environmental. So I read this. The document does not account for or mitigate the levels of dust in Trout Road and the state of the road as a result, where dust is constantly being dragged out of the site and uplifted by HGVs and then spread into surrounding areas, affecting residents, pedestrians and service users in the road. This would include users of the Magic Steps nursery. The dust risk assessment is based on the assumption of certain conditions that don't seem to exist. For example, vehicles leaving the site with aggregate materials would be covered. It says they are typically not covered. The aggregate material is open and visible as the vehicles drive away. The other one, HGVs leaving the site would travel over a clean, hard surface before joining Trout Road. The surface when the site is not clean. The road that goes out of Trout Road is never clean, as vehicles travelling on the unmade ground constantly drag dust onto the internal road. The in-road is filthy, thick with dirt, and when the HGVs drive out, they kick up billowing clouds of dust into Trout Road. We don't feel confident that the dust management plan as well will resolve these ongoing problems, not without a huge clean-up, since the application does not seem to acknowledge the real problems that we face. And by the way, there are now 2 storage areas of aggregates, they haven't been moved, they've created a new one. Furthermore, the levels of PM10s in the survey are based on typical values in other parts of Useley and not in Trout Road, it seems. Reports of respiratory health issues being aggravated that we've heard from residents are consistent with an increase in PM10. So about the noise, the plan provides a revised noise assessment, including a survey carried out across 3 days in mid-January, and yet the problems we have with noise from the site have increased hugely since then. The survey stated that the loudest on-site noise level was a lorry driving by, approximately 65 to 70 decibels, This does not reflect the reality we face now. When HGVs pass over the ramps in the inroad, they make a loud booming sound, and that happens 2 or 3 times, and it happens perhaps 3 or 4 times, up to 3 or 4 times a night. This is far louder than the sound of a lorry driving by. Residents tell us that being awoken 3 or 4 times a night in the earliest hours of the morning due to this, it will certainly take its toll on anyone's mental health. Residents have also told us that health problems have been aggravated because of this, including a man whose migraine levels have increased because his sleep is constantly disturbed. The application and supporting documents do not seem to acknowledge this problem. In summary, our fear is that the evidence considered in the application does not reflect the reality that residents have to face every day and night, as we have done for since last year and even now. Residents have felt so far abandoned because enforcement action has not made a difference to our experience. We appeal to the Council to reject this application on the view that the noise and dust levels caused by activities are unacceptable and dangerous, furthermore conflict with the National Planning Policy Framework, as well as the London Plan and the Hillingdon Local Plan. I just want to read also just one more testimony. This is from... it will explain itself. My elderly father lives very close by. This is from somebody that sent us this message. My elderly father lives very close by and has developed breathing problems. The thick dust on his balcony from the pollution needs cleaning daily. He is woken every night with the noise pollution. It's absolutely disgusting that this pollution is causing residents serious health problems. There's another one. I live down Heathcote Way and my windows are constantly dirty. I polish through my flat every day and my dust is filthy. Every time there's a lot of kids and schools close to the site. It's disgusting that they have to breathe this filthy, polluted air. And I feel that the dust management plan that they've included doesn't mitigate these problems. It only kind of acknowledges Caxton House and St Stephen's Road. And yeah, we just feel that it's just not going to get better, and we think that we want to see action now and to see enforcement action take place on this site immediately. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Hasn't. If you want to just take a seat for a moment, because members might have some questions for you.
Okay. Yep.
But you was spot on your time, so thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Okay, I can see Councillor Cawthorne indicating.
Okay. Hi.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for addressing us. A couple of questions, if I may. The problems that you describe, and I suspect in recent weeks that they've been exacerbated by the very dry period we've had, but nevertheless, have they gone on for some time? Can you give us an idea of how long these problems have gone on, and has the applicant, to your knowledge, made any attempt to engage locally to try and resolve them?
Okay, so we saw them building on this site back in just when lockdown started to came to an end. It was around July last year, and they built more and more and more, and then they started doing more activity. So the problems really hit us around well before August, when we had a planning committee meeting here about that site, and we attended, some of us. And they've gone on, and now with the noise is even worse now. We've not had any contact at all from the site, nothing, no communication. They've not, made any effort. So.
Thank you.
Okay, any other members? Councillor Dott.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask you, I read somewhere like out of hours operation going on. Could you please tell the committee what time you having this problem, like early in the morning, late in the night time?
It's all hours of the night. In terms of the noise of lorries going in, and there are lorries going in and out, and that happens any time in the night. It's 24-hour. It really is, and they come in. Obviously, I think the cargo bays are obviously empty, and so that makes even more noise, and it is an incredible booming sound. It's enough to sort of make you jump out of bed and think there's a bomb or something. It's just that. It's crazy, and it's because of the ramps on, I think, because on the road. And also, I'll say to that as well that in their timings they didn't mention about working on Sunday, but they are very busy on Sunday, and all day Saturday as well, when they were only meant to work up until, I think, lunchtime. So it just seems that it is a site that is operational 7 days a week, and and there's things going on at night as well with the lorries. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other members indicate, so on behalf of the committee, I'd like to thank you for addressing us this evening, and I can let you return to your seat. Thank you.
Cheers, thanks.
Okay, we've got... Okay, yeah. We have a written statement from the applicant, is that correct?
Yes, we do, Chairman. So the applicant, Stantec UK Limited, have sent in a statement. The site has historically been used for industrial/commercial uses and prior to the COVID pandemic airport parking. The proposals provide a meanwhile use of the site whilst a mixed-use residential-led scheme for the wider Rainbow and Kirby industrial sites is discussed with the Council during pre-application discussions and a planning application submitted and determined. The proposed use will provide an active use of the site as well as local employment and help maintain site security and deter fly tipping, which has occurred on site since the previous airport parking use ceased. A shorter temporary period of 12 months is now sought compared to the 36 months previously applied for, and the applicant has made several revisions to minimise potential impacts on surrounding neighbours and the Grand Union Canal involving moving the location of the aggregate store. Additionally, to address resident and consultee comments received during the application, the applicant has agreed: 1. Hours of operation and noise. The applicant has agreed a condition restricting hours of operation on the site, and the principal tenant has been around all subtenants to reaffirm site operation hours and ensure compliance with the hours of operation detailed in the application. 2. Dust management. A contract has been entered into with the National Road Sweeping Company that will sweep the site and along Trout Road to sweep any debris or dust. Initially, they will do this on a weekly basis, and depending on effectiveness, there is scope to increase the frequency if required. This will supplement the manual operation whereby the road/yard is swept by a person working intermittently between the vehicle sweeping. An electric road sweeper has also been purchased and will be used between these operations. This approach will be formalised as part of the dust management plan to be agreed with the Council by planning condition. The main internal road has been concreted to address earlier concerns regarding dust. 3. Noise management plan. The applicant has agreed to establish a formal process of managing any noise complaints with the Council as part of the noise management condition. CCTV cameras are proposed to be installed so that the tenant could better manage the site remotely and follow up any resident complaints with subtenants. The applicant takes its responsibilities as a good neighbour seriously and is keen to work with residents to address any complaints whilst also providing some employment and an active use of the site. We hope that members will support the officer's recommendation for approval. And that's from Stantec, the applicant. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, the difficulty of having a written statement is we can't ask any questions. So that's the process that we have. So unfortunately, we can't do that. Okay, so we've now heard from the petitioner, we've heard from the applicant, but I can see a couple of ward councillors in the public gallery. So who would like to go first? Councillor? Okay, so we've got Councillor Punjab, welcome. I'll explain it, that's fine. I'll explain the traffic light system because it's slightly different for councillors. It's slightly different. It's exactly the same system. It's green for 2 minutes, the third minute is amber, and on 3 minutes I will very politely bring you to a close. When you start talking, press the button. When you start talking, Liz will start the clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Tuckwell, for granting me the permission to speak as Ward Councillor of Useley, and I'm extremely grateful to the planning team for hearing our perspective on this planning application. I'm really disappointed to see the planning application for the Rainbow Industrial Estate being recommended for approval. This is a retrospective planning application, and the users of this site could not possibly meet the standards needed, hence a similar planning application was refused in 2021. Additionally, I understand an enforcement notice has already been issued to the client for the unauthorised use of this land of its own kind. May I stress, Chair, that the agreement with the clients asks vital remedies on noise and dust, but the damage has already been done as this site has been used ahead of planning approval. I've been speaking to residents now for the best part of 3 months, up and down Trout Road, into the neighbouring Raisbury Estate and the streets on Tavistock Road. The conversation with the residents vastly contradicts the evaluation of the planning application, despite remedial efforts by the company to mitigate the impact of noise and air quality. Clearly their remedial approaches have not worked, and the petition is just an example of the anger amongst the community about their use of the Rainbow Estate. The dust around heavily developed Rainbow Estate is coating parked vehicles, windows, and many residents complain they are unable to open their windows for dust entering into their homes. Residents are having to breathe this poor air quality. The noise from the estate is negatively impacting on people's lives. The constant loading and unloading of stones and rubble, the cement mixer, and not to mention the constant run of heavy goods vehicles going down Trout Road at all times of the day. I struggled to talk to residents on the streets, and many, especially in houses opposite the neighbouring flats, spoke of the noise causing them great stress. Those who are working night shifts in our hospitals and airports have disturbed sleep. Residents struggle to watch and hear the television in their own homes or have simple conversations without noise from the estate in the background, or just sit in peace and quiet. Continuous daily noise in the middle of a heavily built-up residential community cannot be acceptable to any of us, Chair. None of us would want to live like this, and I find it totally unacceptable to expect our residents in Useley to either. I'm struggling to understand how this client has passed the noise and air quality assessment and how this application can be recommended for approval. I trust the Planning Committee will duly reconsider and reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, and with time to spare, so thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Okay, members, any questions for Councillor Punjab? Councillor Cawthorne.
Councillor Punjab, hello. Thank you for addressing us. Yeah, I've got a question for you. The way this is being put to us as planning committee members, as I understand it, is we have a situation that's unsatisfactory now, which can hopefully be remedied by the granting of consent with conditions. I just wonder, given all you've said, I wonder what you make of the conditions that are being put forward in terms of their ability to help us get more of a handle on what's happening and deliver a better outcome. I just wonder what your take is on that, please.
I have, sorry, do I press anything? No, okay. I have just listened to the statement from the client, and the thing is, road sweepers are sweeping the roads. What about people's cars, windows, things going into their homes? They have to clean all of that. These are adults, children breathing this air as well, so that can't be cleaned up first and foremost. The noise, well, they put it, we had the response to the canal. They moved it to another site, but that now comes into heavy residential building estate. So we kind of address one issue, but it's a really populated and heavily built area. So you're just bringing the problem from one area to another area of the site. And now, well, the canal may be protected, but the residents are not. So I think there needs to be a lot more that needs to be done there. There is the operational use, which I find totally unacceptable. They were supposed to know that they can't go all hours of the night. They were supposed to be operational hours, and they have far gone above those operational hours. They were there when we've been canvassing in the street, so we know that that's true, and residents have been able to tell you that too.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other members? Councillor Gill.
Just a couple of questions on that. The adverse effect you've mentioned that's had on the local residents, have they gradually got worse, gradually better, or has it been fairly consistent?
I can only say that whilst I've been speaking with them, the anger just keeps on rising. So I can only assume that they're getting worse, or people are having less and less tolerance of something. The dust is evident. It's there everywhere. It's on vehicles. So it's not being swept away. People have to clean their own vehicles and move them. It's on the window. So I can only say, I don't know if it's got better or got worse, but I can say that the anger is there, that people are getting very, very frustrated. So I think people want an action now. So I can only assume that it's getting worse rather than better.
Thank you.
Did you have a follow-up, Councillor? Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other members speak, so thank you, Councillor, for addressing us
so much
this evening. Much appreciated. Okay, I can see another councillor in the audience, Councillor Abbey, if you'd like to come forward. As per our correspondence in the week, as we've had a 3-minute session from your colleague, if we could avoid any duplication, so if you've got new points to raise, I'm sure the committee would be willing to hear your point. So again, exactly the same traffic light system, 3 minutes. I won't go through that again. And as soon as you start talking, Liz will start the clock. If you want to press the button on the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of residents of Useley, who are severely affected by the use of the site for aggregate storage and the consequent HGV movements day and night. This site fronts the canal and is surrounded by the housing on all 3 remaining sites. There is even housing on the opposite side of the canal. The housing is quite dense in parts, and Trout Road is very narrow, exacerbating noise, dust, pollution, affecting many residents. This is the wrong location for such site, which is polluting and causes antisocial use. The residents have looked forward to the redevelopment of the site for more town centre users. Indeed, this area was seen as a suitable site for a much-needed health centre on the B&M site, which was refused permission last year due to flooding. At the committee meeting, the planning officer advised that a more suitable alternative site would be the Rainbow Estate, where it's free from flooding and close to the town centre with easy access for all. Usually already experiences dust and pollutions from waste disposals used as a part of the old coal yard site. This application makes it worse. There is a narrow traffic controlled bridge on Trout Road with a loading limit of 7.5 tonnes. I've circulated a photo which shows the kind of vehicles that regularly use this bridge. The damage on the bridge could lead to residents having no access to on occasions when either Trout Road or Tavistock Road are closed, as residents have experienced previously. This would also hinder the emergency vehicles having access in critical times or make it impossible to get through due to the road being narrow. I've circulated other photographs showing clouds of dust from the site, fires and HGVs operating late at night and in the early hours of 2 or 3 a.m. This lack of restricted hours means HGVs are working throughout the day and night. It's impossible for residents to keep their windows open on warm nights without being constantly disturbed and woken, which is also a safety concern. The dust is also causing serious health problems for local residents, including a young child. One of them has a heart condition and breathing problems. The additional difficulty imposed by trying to breathe with so much dust and pollution in the air is adversely affecting this child's health in a very real and frightening way, and all residents are concerned about this, as are Councillor Punjab and myself. This is completely unacceptable use and should be refused for several reasons. The site should be more properly be used for town centre and health users, which are needed in Useley. I'm shocked to see the application recommended for approval, and that at the very least, it's if the committee do not feel they can refuse it this evening, they will defer it for a site. I'm hoping that they'll defer it for a site visit and see for themselves what residents are experiencing and suffering through on a daily basis. Thank you.
Oh, bang on.
Thank you.
You must have practiced that, so he was well on. But no, thank you for your comments. Any questions for Councillor Abbey? No? Okay, no. And on behalf of the committee, thank you for addressing us this evening. Okay, right. We've had the presentation, we've heard from petitioners, we've heard from the applicant, and we've heard from ward councillors. But before we get into the debate, I'm just going to bring in a couple of people to summarise what we've heard this evening. So, James, do you want to go first?
Yes, so I'm just speaking to respond to some of the speeches that have been made. So, the really important starting position here is we're not making a determination of what's happening now, which is clearly causing harm. What this application is giving a temporary use with quite a large number of planning controls, and those planning controls, the intention behind the planning conditions is that they mitigate the harm. So we're not doubting for 1 minute there's lorries disturbing people at 3 o'clock in the morning, but what we're doing through the Temporary Planning Commission is seeking to pose controls that stop that happening. The situation we've got here is we've got a landowner who's invited various commercial businesses onto their land. Unfortunately, the land doesn't have any pre-existing planning conditions in place, which is partly relates to the temporary airport use, which was allowed by a planning inspector, not by this council, I might add. So it is correct that the council's planning enforcement team have served a notice that identify that effectively these operations occurring without any planning controls are causing harm. But the problem with that notice is it's been appealed, and we know it will be quite some months before the planning inspectorate make a decision on that. So just, I don't have a crystal ball, but we know, for instance, that the off-airport parking appeal took 9 months to be determined by the planning inspectorate. The other problem is that even if the inspector agrees the notice, they'll then impose a compliance period. And although we as a council try and impose short time frames, at the moment 3 and 6 months are common compliance periods. So the concern over that is if that we solely leave this to the planning enforcement notice, that could be many, many months until that in itself brings in control over the operations. So what we're seeking to do here is to control the operations on site to mitigate the harm. That's what this planning recommendation's about. So I've got a couple of technical bits, I'm afraid. So the National Planning Policy Framework specifically states under paragraph 55 that local planning authorities should consider whether otherwise unacceptable development could be made acceptable through the use of conditions or planning obligations. That's actually exactly what we've got here. We've got something that's currently unacceptable, but what we're trying to do through the temporary planning commission, and it is temporary, is to control it through a range of conditions. Now, we know the harm relates to noise, dust, and in particular nighttime operations. So that's exactly what these conditions are covering. Now, I know the other concerns have been raised about, well, would the conditions address such concerns? Now, the conditions we're posing, so for instance, having a dust mitigation plan, it has worked elsewhere. So, again, I don't have a crystal ball, but it has worked elsewhere. So, the National Planning Policy Framework basically requires us that we think we can address the harm through conditions, that's the path we should take. So, so what we think as officers is, and part of the reason you've actually got an addendum, is we work quite hard to come up with quite a large number of conditions. There is a lot of conditions, and there's a lot in those conditions, and the one I'd really highlight is the restrictive hours, because to me that should be a game changer, because that's stopping Sunday working, it's stopping work after 7 p.m, and you'd hope that would make a huge difference to what one resident describes as the inhuman impacts on them. But that resident's referring to noise at 3 in the morning. So that's effectively why we are recommending approval as officers, because I'm afraid to say we think it is the best outcome for the local residents in this case. So my advice to the committee would be, if you think there's anything we've missed in the conditions, certainly we can talk about that, and I'd be more than happy to, if members think we've missed something, we as a planning authority want to do our best to move the goalposts here. So I think we gladly add any extra conditions if members think they're required, but we actually have quite a long list of conditions because we've tried our best to control this as much as possible. But the really key point is I encourage committee not to determine what's there at the moment, but to consider whether, if you did allow a temporary use with lots of controls, those conditions would be a game changer in effect. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that summary, James. I'm sure that will come out in the subsequent debate. But before we open it up to members to discuss this application, I'm just going to ask Nicole to come in and give us a legal perspective.
I obviously won't repeat what Mr. Roger has said, but what I would highlight is that it is relevant that the Council has powers under the Environmental Protection Act 1990 to abate nuisances such as dust, noise. That is one avenue that we have to control nuisances. the local planning authority isn't intending to do that. They have a set of conditions that I have to say are quite detailed, and we have seen them work on other sites. So you've got two elements of control here. If we were to refuse, if the members were to refuse this, you would have to be very clear on your reasons for refusal, and you have to take into account that you've got these conditions here, and that if there was to be an appeal situation, an inspector may not agree that those conditions are necessary, and they may delete them or dilute them, and that is a real risk that should factor into your decision making. And as Mr. Roger has highlighted, realistically, if you don't think there are, or if you think there are things missing from the conditions, that you should highlight those, and they can be beefed up, or you could have an extra condition. But they are sort of two matters that I would take into account. So in summary, you've got two powers of control. You have the conditions, which if they are breached, we have enforcement powers. The EPA, on top of that, if there is a nuisance that's not being caused, that's not covered by a condition, we have powers under the EPA to abate those nuisances, and that should factor into your decision making.
Okay, thank you for that, Nicole. And I think, again, before we just go to the debate, I'll just point out to ward councillors that wherever this goes this evening, you know, the members' inquiries process is there to help you, you know, get officers from enforcement teams to investigate and look at any non-compliance against any condition or not, whatever is determined this evening. So that's something to be very aware of. Okay, I'm going to open it up to debate now. I've got Councillor Higgins and Councillor Dodds.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome back. Hey, this is a great one to start off the year with. So it's very, very difficult, and sympathise with residents. It's one of those ones that, do we say, okay, we'll refuse it, and then the applicant has another 12 months to going through the process and everything else, and so that will continue this horrible effect of what's going on that site, or do we control it? I've been doing this long enough, and I'd go for the latter. I mean, it's quite clearly in the report. It does. This is a way of controlling their activities. I do want to just ask officers, can you please put up the picture of the site for me, please? Yeah, can you go back one? Another one? There, I'm a bit concerned that we're saying that the reason that dust has been created is because that place isn't tarmac. So, I mean, I know in the report it says it's going to be tarmac, but I want officers to explain to me when that's going to happen. The dust control, obviously, I know that's worked in other places, but also the ramping system, I don't know whether we can address that as well to make that less of a bump going in and out of the site. And if we were to give planning permission tonight, how this becomes implemented this evening, does it, or first thing in the morning? Those are the questions I have at the moment, if officers can answer those for me.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Higgins. Just to paraphrase what you said there, I think it's condition of the Hall Road, I guess, was one. I think somebody did mention that in the applicant said they were going to tarmac it or concrete it. I'm glad Councillor Higgins picked up about the ramps, because I do know they make a shocking noise when large vehicles go over them. So if we can have maybe where those ramps are they actually on Trout Road or are they on the site? And there was an issue around timescale of the conditions. I think it does say some are within 28 days and others have to have a little bit more. Yeah, but we'll let officers pick up those couple of points, please.
Yeah, so what you'll see in this photo here is actually the start and end of the Tarmac Hall Road. So where you see a kind of cleaner surface to the south. So where's the button? Yeah. Here. Yeah, that's actually the Hall Road. Now I know that is covered with dust at the moment. What generally tends to happen is if you look at this image here and this image here, the area in which the aggregates are collected is not tarmacked. So the Hall Road itself is actually tarmacked, but this surface here is dragged onto the Hall Road. So what you see in, so let me just go back. I know it's not a great plan, but in this image, that entire blue line there is actually already tarmacked. So I think where you get the noise from is there are some raised elements of rubber which stops the vehicles exiting the site at too quick a speed. So it's actually slowing down the vehicle. So that may be a cause for some of the noise. But yeah, I mean, essentially the tarmacking has already taken place. Yeah, but sorry, not. Do you want to?
So we have had the applicant confirm that the blue line is. The blue line on this plan is the proposed tarmac. Now, the majority of it, not all of it, has been tarmac. So there are pockets that have not been tarmacked. So that might be part of the reason why there is excessive dragging of dust onto the street. So the condition does require the full tarmacking of everything that is the Hall Road. In terms of the noise from the ramped access point, I'm not sure whether it's beneficial to reduce the ramp because it might increase the speed. So it's, I guess we need to make a decision. Yeah, sorry, Councillor Higgins.
Can I come back? Can you put the ramp outside? Then it would slow, you know, they'd have to slow down, wouldn't they?
Just before the public highway?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That could be an option. Are we? Forgive me. Wheel washers. We're not. We've got them on there. So where will they be put in place on site?
I think we've noted that the mitigation should actually be taking place further into the site. At the moment, they've provided us with details to show that they've got a mechanical sweeper which does actually wet the road as well, so it's wetting down some of the dust that's dragged from outside. But myself and Mandip have noted that we should really be asking for some of that mitigation to take place inside the site, so it's then not dragged out.
So with this blue line, which is fantastic, where is actually can you point with your marker where the actual bay is for the aggregate now?
So the aggregate store actually takes place down here.
So so those lorries to get there would really need another road on that corner there where you're pointing.
Well, yeah, it actually covers this section here.
Yeah. So what I'm concerned about is the load. I understand what they're doing here. That's very clever. Thing. But they're still going to have to back up. They're still going to they're still going to have to do all those things and collect the aggregate, which is causing the dust. So I don't understand why they haven't got bays if they have aggregate there that they could go drive into, and then that probably would solve the problem. And the thing that I'm a bit concerned about as well is on the addendum here is there should be no noise of reversing beacons audible or revising alarms by the driver, but all vehicles are fitted these as standard. I don't think you can turn them off, and obviously if they're backing in to load up or they're loading on the side, I'm just a bit confused here.
I want to pick up the reversing beacon question.
If I start with the ramp, we are imposing a request for a Section 278 agreement. So what we could do, because the ramp would then move from within the application site to the public highway, where we have to be in control, I think that's something that we can take away as a request to be looked into, whether the ramp externally would cause less harm and make less noise. But I think that's something that the specialist area of the highways and transportation team need to look at. But that could be done if we added that in. In terms of the bays, I completely understand where Councillor Higgins is coming from. Most aggregates do have bays where you would then formally park. This is a temporary use. It's probably a lot smaller than most traditional aggregate store areas. The whole site would probably be about the size of a permanent agricultural storage area. So I think pushing for specific bays, which then need to be built and constructed, is probably unviable and unreasonable. But the mitigation of wheel washing and also imposing the need for a cover on the aggregate bays could potentially alleviate some of the harm from the dust concerns that you've raised, Councillor Higgins, and also washing down the Hall Road internally would also make a significant effect, which is something I don't think happens regularly on site at the moment.
Through you, Chairman. Sorry to come back. The ramp issue, that's why I'm so close to the transport guy. I just nudged him, and I think probably an option to stop the noise would be a tabletop ramp, which means that the lorry comes up and has to go down slowly. So that he'll hopefully say that's okay. They're doing this extensive work and they haven't finished all this tarmacking. So is there an opportunity for us to make it that where that road is, to make that wider, so it is like they could reverse back onto it rather than, because the dust in the middle is always going to be a problem, so they're going to have to constantly, especially on a dry day, they're going to constantly having to wet that. So that's where I am with this, really. I don't know whether anything of that can be addressed, really, because at the end of the day, we want to try and mitigate as many of the problems for the residents, and that's what we're trying to do.
No, some good points there. And I think Mandy's been reading my notes here, because the things I've got here is wheel washing. We use that on quite a few sites which aren't necessarily dust, but they could be mud. Proper construction sites, and vehicles have to be washed before they go onto the highway. So I think wheel washing needs to be explored. I think certainly the point was raised about covers. These are big 26-ton vehicles, and they'll be on dry days, lots of dust residue along Trout Road. So I think we need to condition that covers are mandatory. In relation to the ramps, I think yes. I think if we could make them a little bit less acute, I think, because they do make a hell of a noise. But the hours of operation will help with that, because it won't be 3 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning or whichever. But still, even at 7 o'clock in the morning, it's a nuisance. James, did you want to come in?
You've partly stolen my thunder slightly, because I've been thinking since I've heard the petitions, and I actually have the word covered written down. So I think we could definitely impose an additional condition that all vehicles have to leave the site covered, and that would meet all the condition tests and would be enforceable.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I've got other councillors wanting to speak as well. Councillor? Okay, thank you. Councillor Dott, followed by Councillor Cawthorne, and we're back to Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I can't deny the facts, like residents are having problems. I have my sympathy with the residents, but we have to be neutral in this case as a committee members. This application is temporary for 12 months and subject to Section 106 agreement, right? There are conditions recommended by the officer to impose on this application, and we, as a member, we can assure the residents, like, if there are any breach of condition, there are a number of ways to deal with that. Officer who expertise in there. On the other side, when I listen to the petitioner, they don't believe in that enforcement action because this happened before. But what I can suggest, if the committee can consider the site visit before we can decide anything, we can physically check what it is. So that's my suggestion, if the committee can consider that.
Are you proposing a site visit then? Okay. Right, any other councillors wanting to? Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you. I've listened to the discussion with interest on this. I suppose the question for us as a regulatory planning committee is delivering the best outcome we possibly can. We know the situation at the moment is wholly unacceptable, and the question is, are we better off throwing this out here and now, or actually conditioning it in a way that gets a grip on some of the issues that we're hearing about? I'm leaning towards the latter, although I suppose the worry I have in all this is that one sort of enforcement issues have been challenged, are a matter of abeyance, and I just wonder what it is that makes us think that the applicant is more likely to follow these conditions that we can see here, or will we get drawn into a long drawn-out situation that's unsatisfactory with enforcement that needs to take place. So I suppose a bit of comfort around that, to the extent it can be given, would be helpful, I think. I'll leave it at that for now, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Has the applicant agreed these conditions, I suppose, is the question?
Yes, so apart from anything we had tonight, but my understanding is that the applicant has agreed all the conditions that are recommended, and that includes those in the addendum, I might add. I cannot see any reason why the applicant wouldn't agree to vehicles being covered or indeed anything else that's been discussed this evening, because there isn't anything manifestly unreasonable about anything that's been discussed this evening. Unfortunately, we have to slightly give the applicant the benefit of the doubt, and I know that's not too convincing, but we've imposed as strict conditions as we think we possibly can, and I think that's the comfort I have to give in terms of, so we, much earlier in the meeting, there was reference given at one point to 4 conditions imposed by a planning inspector. There's a lot more than 4 conditions here, so that's in effect the comfort I can give. But the other point I was going to say is that Councillor Tuckwell alluded to the members' inquiry process, and Nicole mentioned the Environmental Protection Act. So just to sort of clarify, and partly for the benefit of ward councillors and the public, so as a planning committee, you're looking at the planning powers the council has and making a planning decision in effect. So totally separate from that, we have an ASBET team who they deal with enforcement under the Environmental Protection Act. So you could almost see it as a sort of second strand. The point Councillor Tuckwell was making is the ward councillors can do members' inquiries to encourage our ASBET team to implement their powers. So there is a whole different angle to this that cannot form part of your decision making, but I'd certainly be happy to give any advice after the meeting councillors would like regarding the ward councillors concerning communications they might wish to have with the councillors' ASBET team. I know this is a difficult decision for councillors, but I generally think that the best option is to grant a heavily conditioned temporary approval. One other final thing you may wish to consider, and this is perhaps me offering a bit more comfort, is obviously we have heard a lot of material this evening, including a lot of information from petitioners. One option you've done in the past is that you give delegated authority to me in conjunction with the chairman and Labour lead to just reflect post-committee, and if there's any tightening of conditions, that i.e. tomorrow morning, if I'm thinking if only we'd added an extra 14th or 15th planning condition, what would then happen is I would then draft the condition, share it with the chairman and Labour lead, as long as it's subject to the provisos that I'm strengthening the, effectively either adding conditions or strengthening conditions. That might give you a little more comfort as well, because obviously, as I say, we're reflecting on quite a lot of material, and that would be almost a further, perhaps, Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add something just about the condition? So, where James spoke a moment ago about the appeal inspector and the conditions that we're trying to impose, throughout the appeal for the off-airport car park, the council tried to provide a list of conditions, which some of which the appeal inspector did not agree with. So, for instance, a drainage condition was, we asked for a drainage condition to be applied. The appeal inspector decided that a temporary permission for 12 months did not warrant a drainage condition, so I think that the risk of us not being able to implement the conditions as part of an appeal would be something that we need to consider.
Thank you for that, Chris. I think I'll summarise before we continue with the debate, in as much as this is a difficult decision for this committee, and I think it comes down to very simple. We can either leave the residents exposed with no controls or regulation, continuing with what we've heard tonight in terms of overnight working, dust, noise and the like, or we can grab this and have control over it almost immediately. And I think that's the choice for this committee to make. Councillor Higgins, did you want to come back?
Yeah, sorry, there's a couple of things that I didn't get answers for. One was the road widening on that side of where the aggregate is, because the drivers will just cut across there. You know, if there's no way of physically keeping them to that road, and I would assume that road would have to be wide enough for two vehicles to pass each other. So that would be my first thing that I'd concern about. Obviously, the condition about the tabletop, I hope that goes in. But the thing that is worrying me is just something as maybe late at night, it's just pinged in my head just now, is the moving of the aggregate and delivery. Because obviously they deliver aggregate there. It's not a site where they can dig it up underneath and its thing. So that must create a lot of dust when they've emptied those lorries into those bays. So have we got a condition to make sure that is controlled?
Okay, so a couple of points there raised. Widening of the Hall Road, and how wide
No,
is it?
not the haulage.
The Hall Road.
The road where the aggregate is kept.
Are you on about this
Yes,
bit,
yeah,
part here? So you want the tarmac extended? Is that what you're asking for?
Wherever, if it's access onto to collecting the aggregate, I want it tarmac so it goes back to, so it's not on gravel itself. So then it will, whether that is vertically, horizontally, or at angles, I don't really mind. So that's the thing. But the also thing is I want to try and protect residents as much as I possibly can. And what occurred to me is that this is obviously delivery of aggregate will be put onto site. So we must make sure that when that is delivered, that isn't done in a controlled manner, that is not creating just dust, a bloom of dust just going across the whole of the site. So.
Okay.
Now on the beepers, by the way, that I think might be too onerous on us. I need an answer on that as well. Thank you.
Yeah. So 3 points there: widening of the road, or extending it, and the mitigation of dust when the aggregate is delivered, and the reversing beacons.
I have to be honest, I don't know enough about reversing beacons to answer this question about whether they are able to be switched off, so we can look into whether the condition is actually enforceable. Alan, do you know more about reversing beacons than me?
Apologies, Chairman, I don't know much about reversing beacons either.
So that's delegating.
That can be delegated to you and the police. Yeah.
I think we just need to, as Mandip has said, just need to do a bit of research into that and then delegate authority to amend that particular condition. But again, I will stress that the hours of operation will prevent reversing beacons going off at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, so because I do know that sound does carry. Any other points? Any other follow-up, Councillor?
2 questions in the dark. Chairman, 2 questions are still waiting for an answer.
They're coming back now.
So the delivery of aggregates will need to take place during the operational hours. So that is the 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. that's within the application form. So they can't do that. They can't deliver the bulk of the aggregates in the overnight hours. So that is controlled. If you feel that they should be further restricted, that the delivery of aggregates should be at a shorter period of time during the day.
Sorry, Mandy, I'm sorry for you, Chairman. I'm not so much that the stuff's being delivered. I understand that. It's about the delivery of how they empty the vehicles on site. So if the aggregate comes in from outside, it drives in, it fills up those bays, so they can then pick up the aggregate they need. Other vehicles come in and pick them up. So I'm asking about when it's they have a delivery of all this, can we control that in some way to make sure that there's dust. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't make it clear. I never speak properly. You know that.
Honestly, it's not you, Councillor Higgins. I just don't know enough about aggregates. So yes, why don't we amend condition the dust mitigation plan, and 7, to have a specific section about dust mitigation during the delivery of the aggregates.
The bulk, when it comes in on bulk.
Yes.
That's what Councillor Higgins is referring to, I think, yeah.
That's right. On the final point, which was the extension of the road, I do think it's potentially unreasonable to ask for the tarmacking of the entire area. We can investigate tarmacking of a greater area, but the other mitigations, such as washing down, wheel washing, is likely to alleviate some of the current problems on the site. So I personally feel it's unreasonable to go to that extent, but I will leave that with members.
I'm going to ask Nicole to come in at this point, because I think we're looking at 17 conditions now, I think, on this, if I'm not mistaken, 15 or 16 or 17 conditions, and I think we do have to apply, as we heard at our training last night, what is a level of reasonableness as well. So, Nicole?
In regards to the road widening, I would say, given the type of application that we have here, being 12 months, I don't think that would meet the reasonableness test. And I think it does go too far, although I completely understand what you're trying to achieve. We do have an extensive number of conditions here, and they are much more detailed than usual, and that must also factor in your decision when you are making it. I don't think that there is any other condition that's unreasonable, although I do feel that we do need to look at the beacon reversing situation. I'm not an expert either, but we just need to see if that is enforceable. But you've got comfort from the fact that Labour lead and chairman, along with James, will ensure that conditions are full enough, and if there's any lessening of that, that will probably mean that, well, it will mean the matter will come back to committee, because that is a change from what you would have decided upon this evening. So I think you're okay, but borderline with widening.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to ask the question publicly to Alan, and Alan will think. So, my next question will be: is how wide is that road? Okay, and how wide is a vehicle that is going in there to collect? And remember, they have to have 2 vehicles passing one another. So one comes in, one goes out. So, if Alan can answer those questions. Thank you, Alan. Sorry to put you on the spot.
How wide is the road and how wide is the vehicle, I think?
Thank you, Chairman. Unfortunately, I don't know how wide the Hall Road is. I do know how wide Trout Road is. If I can say, the cost of widening that road so it's wide enough for 2 cars to pass would not be that great.
What's the width of the road at the moment? The blue. Can you put the blue line?
Yes.
Does officers know what the width? Through you, Chairman. Do the officers know the width of that road, please?
I would.
And then a width of one of those HD vehicles.
I've been on site. It's not wide enough to fit 2 HGVs passing each other in different directions.
Correct.
But the reason for that is because the open storage, which is for marble and timber, and the lighting storage would be too close together at the moment to be able to create a wide enough access for 2 vehicles. So potentially, yeah, we'd have to get them to move further apart in order for the road to be widened. Those 2 sections there, so you can see the Hall Road in the middle.
So through you, Chairman, then how are you're going to ask vehicles to create dust anyway, so they're going to go down on the road, which is just wide enough. They're going to fill up, and another vehicle comes along. Instead of staying on the tarmac road, will go across the middle of the thing where it's causing all the dust. So we're not really, what we're doing, we're just creating dust in a different way. So if they want to operate in a way that is reducing dust, then surely the width of that road has to be wide enough for 2 vehicles, whatever they are, to pass one another. In this case, I think it's about 5 metres is one of those juggernaut things, or is it 4.5? I don't know what it is. So that would mean to me that then what we're asking then to put forward is not realistic either. But I don't know whether legal can tell me that I'm wrong here.
And I think I hear what you're saying, and I think what we have to be also bear in mind, this is a temporary temporary planning permission. This isn't a permanent structure, it is temporary. And I would also consider that if we had a condition on wheel washing for the whole road, for vehicles that before they leave to go onto the public highway, and that road was dampened down, then that should mitigate that. But you know, that's again something that maybe Nicole can come in on. But again, let's remind ourselves this is a temporary planning application.
I think it's going to be impossible to resolve all kinds of dust issues. But what you have before you is a number of conditions that does deal with dust, the dampening down, the wheel washing, the management plan that has to be up to the SPG standards. So there's going to be things in that are going to require further mitigation. And the widening of the road is another way to mitigate dust. But I just don't think that requiring that on a 12-month temporary permission is reasonable, because there are enough conditions on site to vastly improve the dust situation. And as I said earlier, if the conditions, they fail to do that, and we find that they are adhering to the conditions, and there's still nuisances caused by dust, you have powers under the EPA as the council to abate that, and notice can be served if the relevant legal tests are met, and they have to comply with that abatement notice. Any failure to do so can result in prosecution. So you're not just looking at these conditions. If there are elements that are missed or the conditions aren't quite working, there is another power for the council, not the local planning authority, to take control of that situation. So, and that does, whilst the two powers need to be separate as local planning authority and as the council, it is relevant that those powers are in place.
Do you want to come back,
to
Chairman?
you, Chairman? Yeah, that's fantastic, and I hear you, and I'm trying to think of what the residents are going through and how we can sort of make this better. But if a notice, as I know what the planning times are on notices, on the environment side notices, how long do they take to implement? Are they implemented on a stop notice straight away, or do they have 28 days to reply and then another 28 days to do the thing? Is it the same process? So
the time frames are pretty similar, but they have to comply. Once the notice is served, they have to comply, and then they have a period of time in which they can go to the magistrate's court to have it amended or removed. But again, it's that reasonable test. You know, there are as much as you need to ensure that the residents are protected, and of course that's important. There needs to be time in order to ensure that notices that maybe are served too quickly on an applicant trying to run business, they need time also to be able to fight their corner, so to speak. So that's why you have these time delays. And there are stop notices that you can serve, which are with immediate effect, but the legal tests on those are very high. And I could go into detail now and talk about stop notices, but I don't think that's actually important for your decision-making purposes.
I promise you this is my last point. Promise.
Okay.
I do promise. On other sites, we have a controlled management scheme of how the site is run or how it operates. We had one before in an industrial area with, I think it was Asda or somewhere else. Do we have anything like that in here as well, that they give us a plan of operations, in the sense that when a vehicle comes on site, is there going to be a bay where they have to wait till the other lorry can come out and things? There is a I can't remember what it's something that we did in constructions. So if we can't widen the road, surely that we could come up with a solution that makes them, I don't know, the lorry, one lorry's come in and is picking up its aggregate, the other lorry has to wait in a parking area till the other one is finished and the other one has to go out. That would reduce those effects, because otherwise people are busy, lorry drivers are busy, and they have a job to do and they have to get somewhere. So, you know, if they'll cut across there making dust and stuff. I just want to know whether that is possible, as we are trying to find some sort of other conditions.
No, I think your scrutiny on this is top dollar, as always. But I'm referring it here as an on-site logistics plan, something along those lines. So in old-fashioned money, you'd have a banksman. in those terms. But James, did you want to come in?
Yeah. So what you're alluding to is that on very large major sites, we impose a construction and logistics condition while they do the construction process that controls the lorries and various. And I think the question you're asking is, could we take some of that condition and impose it here? And I think the answer is yes. I think what we'd have to do is to look at that condition, as I say, take out all the bits we could apply here, and then that could be part of the post-committee process where the sort of beefing up, I think we referred to in a non-technical sense, occurs, and the scrutiny of that is I would present the wording to the chairman and Labour lead for them to agree, and then what happens, just to clarify for the members of the public, is that we don't issue a final decision notice till we've got all these extra conditions and beefing up, but we would try and do that quickly, nonetheless. So I would be looking to the chairman and Labour lead to, as soon as I can email them, to quickly respond. Sorry to put you on the spot, because obviously in this case we do want to, if members are minded to approve, we want to get the decision notice out quickly, so we get the timeline moving. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, and I will propose this now with all those other bits and pieces that we managed to get.
You're moving the
all those other tabletops and all the other things. I enjoy you reading all that back. That'll be good.
I will try. I will try. Okay. Right. Anybody other speakers? We're moved on this, Councillor Gill.
Just one last bit, because from the discussion I've heard, it's quite an unusual set of conditions, which is quite rare. And so I'm kind of just bouncing on Councillor Dott's idea of a site visit, just to contextualise the problems of certain residents and to see what it is from the point of view of the business itself, to see where the problems are arising. So it was just to bounce onto that idea.
I under normal circumstances, I don't seek to discourage a site visit, so I want to say that straight away. But there's actually a very sound reason not to in this case, because we would lose a month, basically. And I honestly don't think, you've seen a lot of photos, we've heard all of the problems from the local residents. I'm not sure what extra layer of knowledge you would gain from that site visit, but it does mean we've lost an extra month before the clock is ticking on the controls that we're debating this evening. So to me, that one reason is a very compelling reason against a site visit. But as I say, I do promise everyone I don't normally seek to discourage site visits, but this is a very unusual case. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Were you seconding a site visit? You were. Okay, so we're moved and seconded on a site visit. So I'm going to have to put that to the vote. So all those in favour of a site visit. So that's 3. All those against? So the site visit is not passed. Okay. So we are moved for approving this application. Anyone want to take us forward to second it? Councillor Cawthorne. So you're seconding this. Okay.
Right.
So we're moved and seconded, and this is where I now have to put it all together. Okay, because we need to know what we're voting on, and it's important that people watching today also know what we're voting on, and people watching online as well. So I'll do my best, and I've got officers here to help me. So, okay, right. So, in terms of, we've got the addendum, and there's no changes to that, I understand. We've got the conditions which are in the planning pack. We are looking at wheel washing condition on vehicles leaving the site, and we want that to be specific enough so that there's no dust trailing onto Trout Road. That's certainly what we want. To complement that, we also want a condition, or whether we weave it into one of the existing conditions, to ensure that all vehicles carrying aggregate are covered. All vehicles. So we need to weave that into one of the existing condition 7. Yeah. Okay. James has also given us a catch-all. I think the term you used was beefing up, but if we want to tighten up any of the conditions, so if any of us sort of think overnight that we might want to reword or tighten something up, then it'll be myself, yourself, Councillor Dott, will work with James to
What I was requesting is officers be given delegated authority to reflect overnight. So that would be myself, Nicole, Mandip, Alan as highway officer, and Chris. And then we will then, as part of some of the conditions we're talking about agreeing, where yourself and Chairman Labour lead, we will include that beefing up when we're seeking your authority for some of the final wording of the conditions. So just to be precise about that suggestion.
Good. Okay, working down the list here, we certainly want the dust mitigation condition to include the bulk delivery, to ensure that that does not have any impact on, I can see it, if it comes in on a big truck, it's tipped, there'll be huge plumes of dust. We want to make sure there's measures in there to deal with that. We talked at length about reversing beacons, and we've just got to make sure that we look into that to see whether or not that we can actually enforce that condition. So we will work on that. And then lastly, unless I've missed anything, we talked about what I call is an on-site logistics plan, where we'll take some of the bits from previous conditions and we'll reword it in a way which is suitable to this site. And there was another one, Councillor Higgins has just reminded me, is about the raised tables rather than acute ramps. So have I missed anything? No? Thank you. Okay. So guys, that's what we're voting on this evening. So we are moved and we're seconded. Can I have a show of hands for approving this application, please? All those in favour? So that was Councillor Dotts, Councillor Gill, Councillor Gaelic. Are you abstaining? Abstaining. So that's however many that is and one abstention. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. So I can confirm that agenda item 7 this evening is approved with extensive conditions. And I just want to say congratulations to the committee for some very heavy scrutiny. And you'll find this, new members to this committee, we do scrutinise heavily our applications. What I will say before we move on to the next item is for the ward councillors to use the members' inquiries process. Really be understanding what these conditions mean to your residents, and use that members' inquiry process to get officers to look at any contraventions going forward. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Let's now move on to agenda item 8, which is actually not too far down the road from this previous site, which is the FLC car sales at Falling Lane. Mandip, is that you? Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda item number 8 is the FLC car sales site. Now, this application was approved a number of years ago, so it was approved with outline planning permission. So the application before us is the reserve matters. So when it came to us before, I have to be honest, when it came to us as an outline planning application, it had almost exactly the same drawings we're going to see this evening, but we were only then considering 3 issues, and today we're only considering appearance and landscaping. So we have the application at FLC car sales. Just for the purposes of context, we granted outline planning permission for the erection of a 2 to 4 storey building with 30 apartments within it. So a mixture of sizes, 1 to 3 bedrooms and some studios, as well as on-site car parking, which I believe is in a basement. So the application is seeking to deal with the reserve matters, which are set out within the officer's report. We have detailed design and appearance and landscaping only. So the application site is located on the junction of the High Street and Falling Lane, so yes, not very far from the last agenda item. So it's currently used as a car sales site. It is still in operation for car sales. There has been no implementation of this planning permission as yet, but they are seeking to discharge their reserve matters, or have approved their reserve matters. The proposed site plan is fairly self-explanatory. The building is along the street frontage. We have vehicular access of Falling Lane into the site, which leads down to a basement car park. We have amenity at ground floor abutting the western boundary, and that abuts the park, so it's a green-on-green boundary. We have the basement floor plan, which was previously approved, so that provides the on-site car parking. The quantity hasn't changed. The information about all of this information about the size of the basement and the number of car parking spaces was as per the approval. We have the ground floor plan, which in effect is exactly the same as previously approved. I will take you to some of those previously approved plans, and they were in yesterday's presentation pack, just to demonstrate that we have in effect given permission already. First floor plan, second floor plan, and then the third floor plan, so we can see the recesses to assimilate with the neighbours along this within the application site. We have a roof pan with some PV panels. These are the proposed elevations that we have, so it is principally brick finished, and just to add that you can see where it reduces down to 2 stories to ensure that it assimilates within its park setting on the western boundaries. More proposed elevations. We have the landscape proposal, so we are looking at landscape as part of this reserve matter, so we have amenity spaces for residents, and we have play area in blue for future residents. We have some photographs of the site, so you can see from this bird's eye view. I'm not sure of the age of this image, if I'm honest, but it doesn't look that different today. It's still car sales and predominantly in that layout. There is a residential block to the north of the site, just there, and that block was considered in terms of its impact, its relationship during the main outline planning permission, and none of those relationships are changing through these reserve matters that we're approving. We take you through some site photographs, so we have the application site and the block that I just talked about. You can see in the distance, which is just to the north of the site, so we are in a mixed area, and the application would obviously invariably change the use of the site from commercial use to residential, but that has already been permitted under the outline application. So this is also the vehicular access, which would be retained and used to access the basement car park. This is the principal high street elevation. Internally within the site, fairly straightforward, the adjoining park, the rear of the site, and the block to the north. This is a CGI, so these are not site photographs. So this is what the applicants envisaged the proposed development would look like. So there is a variation in materiality where the upper floor is set back and also in different treatment, and there is a corner bookmark design feature which is encouraged. We all have our subjective opinions on design, but it will probably look a lot better than the current FLT car sales, which is an underuse of a town centre site or an edge of centre site. So I did promise I would give you the previously approved plans, so they are very similar to what we saw a few years ago at Planning Committee. So we have the approved elevations on screen, the approved ground floor and site plan. The recommendation is again to approve the reserve matters before us. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. James, did you want to come in?
I was just going to really quickly sort of finish off in effect by saying that we do think this is a relatively straightforward application for the committee to consider. There's no policy conflicts. We did consult 75 surrounding properties and there was no objections. So just wanted to highlight that as a final point. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, well, before we go to the debate, just to remind members that this is reserve matters. The outline consent has already been given. I actually remember sitting over there about 3.5 years ago on this one. So we are restricted on this one, and for new members that might feel a bit, but that's the process that we're in. So I've got Councillor Higgins indicating, followed by Councillor Dott.
Yeah, I'll go with officer's recommendation on this. It's quite straightforward. We did the hard work 3 years ago, so hopefully it's about time it's built and helping the residents of Useley have some homes. So good. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move to Councillor Dott.
Yeah, I'm happy to second the officer's recommendation, but I have only one concern. It's about cyclist and pedestrian safety. As in the highways report, there's a recommendation for instead of 1.2 meter bar rails, 0.6 meter is the recommendation. I just wanted to make sure, is that the condition imposed in there?
Okay. Alan, is that even something we can consider on this?
If I can, I'll let Alan respond in a minute. To those that were involved in the original determination, funnily enough, it was highways was the contentious issue. That was the issue the committee extensively debated. I think I'm right, and it was actually deferred and had to come back to committee because there was some tweaks done to the plans to make sure it all worked from a highways perspective. So I just wanted to say that as a starting point, that's actually the background context to this. That scrutiny Councillor Higgins referred to was actually on the highways aspects, on the outline planning consent. But I appreciate I'm not answering your question, so I'll leave that to see whether Alan can.
Okay, over to you, the hot potatoes with you, Alan. Yeah?
Thank you for picking up that comment. This planning application is for the appearance and the landscaping, and the landscaping includes the boundary treatments, which will be a wall with railings above. I've asked that the wall is no more than 0.6 metres high, so that people have good visibility displays. People can, of course, see through the railings. That's what I've asked for. Thank you, Chairman.
Do you want to come in?
There is so the reason it's not been picked up in the reserve matters is because when a condition we would normally discharge the landscaping condition, at which point Alan would then reiterate these comments, but to avoid it getting lost, it might be easier to impose a condition or add an informative to reflect Alan's comments that the wall into the outside the basement area should be no more than X height and X finish.
Yeah, sorry, that would be a condition. We'd need to do that by planning condition.
As you seconded, Councillor, if we're happy to add that additional condition that deals with the wall height or the fence height, are you happy with that, Councillor Higgins, as you moved?
Well spotted, yes, I'm very happy.
Yeah, and we'll delegate that to James and co. Okay, we're moved and seconded. Can I have a show of hands for this application, please? That's unanimous. Councillor Gaelic, are you abstaining? Okay, so that's unanimous. So, agenda item 8 this evening is approved. Thank you very much. Right, that brings us to the end of this evening's proceedings. If you've been watching us on YouTube, thank you very much for your time. Hope you've enjoyed it, but we are going to be bidding you good night now. And I just want to say thank you to the officers for supporting us this evening. Thank you to the members for your participation and again your high quality scrutiny. And wish everybody a very good evening, and we'll close down now. Thank you.